My brother wants me to be the legal guardian of his child, so I asked his wife to do a paternity test first, before I can become the child's guardian. Now their marriage is coming to an end. I am 28 years old and have a 30-year-old brother. About 2 weeks ago, he asked me to become the legal guardian of his son. His son is only 6 months old. 2 weeks ago, my brother came to visit me and told me that he and his wife wanted me to become his legal guardian because his job required him to move to another city, and his wife, who is 29 years old, spends most of her time in the hospital undergoing chemotherapy. My brother also could not refuse this offer because he could not stay here because the salary here is higher. Guardian, because his work requires him to move to another city, and his 29-year-old wife spends most of her time in the hospital receiving chemotherapy. My brother was also unable to refuse this offer because he cannot remain in his current location, because the salary for this job is higher than his current job, and he urgently needs the money to pay for his wife's treatment, because she was diagnosed with stage 2 liver cancer last month. So he made a deal with his in-laws that they would take care of his wife while he went to work in another state for 5 days and came back at the weekend. But they are old and cannot take care of his wife and son at the same time, so he wants me to take over the responsibility of taking care of my nephew. Apart from each other, we have no other family, so I am the only one he can turn to, which is why it is hard for me to refuse. Our parents are both, and we were in our 20s then, so we have been living on our own ever since. My brother works in marketing and I am a high school teacher, so we are not wealthy. I am too busy and tired to take on the extra responsibility of caring for my nephew. I also can't refuse my brother because we only have each other, and I would feel bad if he got angry with me because of it. Another reason I was reluctant to agree to this legal guardianship was that I had heard a lot of gossip about my sister-in-law. We live in a relatively small town, where news travels fast, and a few years ago, before my brother got married, I heard from a colleague that one of her cousins had gotten into a lot of legal trouble for falsifying paternity. Now she was being sued by her husband, and although people weren't sure about it, whenever they gossiped, one name kept coming up: my current sister-in-law. I really don't know how or to what extent she was involved, but I do know that she was somehow involved and helped them cover it up for a few years after their child was born. At the time of birth, their son was almost 2 years old, and the guy's wife, my sister-in-law's best friend, insisted that they get married so that she could quit her job and go home to live with her son. His mother suspected that something was wrong because she was so insistent on her decision. Eventually a paternity test was done, and we learned that apparently my now sister-in-law played a major role in the scam, getting her best friend to contact her cousin who worked at the hospital and regularly taking money from her best friend and her unsuspecting husband to make sure it all stayed a secret. So basically she and her best friend were scamming the poor guy while her best friend got into legal trouble for it, and she got away with it for almost 2 years. My brother told me that he met a woman who happened to be the same person I had told him about and warned him about in that paternity scam, but he was convinced that she had nothing to do with it. He believed her, not the rumors and gossip he heard about her. I didn't know what to say to him, so I didn't interfere. Less than a year later, they got married and had a child. I didn't say anything at the time because I didn't want to disturb their perfect marriage. Last month, she was diagnosed with stage 2 liver cancer, so she has been in and out of the hospital for some time. I didn't say what I had heard from my friend at the time, but when my brother said they wanted me to be the legal guardian of their son, I decided I didn't want to get involved in anything right now, so I told him I would only agree to legal guardianship because he didn't like the implication in my words and said that even though they had been together for many years, I was still suspicious of his wife for no reason. But I stood by my statement and told him that I would not be his son's legal guardian if he did not first do a paternity test, because I really did not want to get into unnecessary trouble in case she really was hiding something. After some arguing, he finally gave in and told me that he would go do it. Then I did not hear from him for 2 whole weeks. But then 3 days ago he suddenly called me and told me that I no longer needed to sign any documents and that he was staying here. I was confused because he suddenly canceled the move, so I asked him what had changed, and he told me to mind my own business and hung up. This surprised me because my brother is a kind and polite person, so I had no idea what had happened in the past few days. I couldn't even ask anyone else because the only person who might know what was going on with him is his wife, and I didn't want to talk to her. So I waited a day, hoping that my brother would tell me what happened himself. But he didn't, so I did what I had to do and called my sister-in-law. As soon as she answered the phone, I called her and she started screaming at me, accusing me of ruining her marriage. I don't know why she said that, but one thing is for sure. Something terrible must have happened, and I'm afraid it has something to do with the paternity test. I was desperate to get my brother to take the paternity test because I wanted to buy myself some time to think about how to handle the custody issue, and I didn't want to get into trouble either in case he wasn't the child's biological father. But I guess his wife must have been hiding something, and my insistence on the paternity test must have set something off, because I can't think of any other reason why my brother would have made such a decision. I feel so guilty because my selfish actions could ruin my brother's marriage, and the fact that his wife has cancer makes me feel even more guilty. Ida insisted that my brother take the paternity test before I agreed to become the legal guardian of his child. Update 1. Thank you all for your kind messages and comments. I'm glad to know that not everyone judges me for trying to put myself first. I spoke to my brother today and he told me about everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks. After I asked him to take a paternity test, he told me that he went straight home after our meeting and told his wife about my request. He thought it would be a very straightforward conversation because he didn't think his wife would object, but she was very against it and it left him baffled. She said that my suggestion that he take a paternity test was an insult because it showed that I still thought she was a liar, and what was worse, that she had been lying to her own husband. So she objected to the paternity test and wanted him to find another way. But I overreacted to the suggestion of a paternity test, and even he began to suspect that there was something wrong with her. After thinking about it for a few days, he finally gave in and decided to take the paternity test, but without telling his wife. He didn't know what to expect, but secretly hoped that he wouldn't find out anything he didn't want to know. Unfortunately, I think everyone knows what he found out by now. My brother and his son are not a pair. He was very shocked by the results of the first test. He had a second test done just to make sure there was no mistake. But the second time the results were the same. He was shocked by what he found out because it meant that his marriage was a lie. But he didn't know how to face his wife. He had never paid any attention to the rumors about her, even after I warned him. Now it seemed that everyone else had been right and he had been completely wrong about his wife. A few days after he got the results, he decided to finally confront his wife. At first, she tried to deny it, but the facts were there and she could no longer escape them. He was not the father of the son he had raised for so long. After a while, she finally confessed to him that when they were first married, she had an affair with a friend, and he happened to be out of town at the time, which is how she got pregnant. She never told him about it because she felt it would destroy their marriage forever. Once she got pregnant, she knew she didn't want to be with anyone but my brother. My sister-in-law also confessed her first paternity fraud, revealing that she had gotten her best friend in touch with her cousin, who worked at the hospital. If her friend hadn't independently run a paternity test at another hospital, her husband would never have found out. So whatever anyone else told her was true. I can't believe that despite knowing the consequences of cheating and lying, she still went through with it and put my brother through the same thing. It's unbelievable and disgusting. Now I'm glad I forced my brother to get a paternity test. Otherwise he might not have found out anything. She didn't work when she married my brother was supporting her because she was unemployed when they got married and decided to be a full-time mom and housewife. So she was not with him because she had confidence in him, but because she really had nowhere else to go after she got pregnant. My brother believes that this is the real reason why he stayed, and I agree with him. If she was unfaithful to him a year after getting married, then she didn't love him. The only reason she stayed with my brother was that he was willing to forget the past, completely trust her, and provide for her unconditionally, while she only cared about herself. My brother is still trying to come to terms with this, but I'm not. I always knew that my sister-in-law was not the most trustworthy person, but I never said anything because I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble in my brother's life. And he seemed really in love with her, and they got pregnant less than a year after getting married. I couldn't say anything that might destroy their marriage when they were about to have a child together, and once my nephew was born, I would stop talking about my sister-in-law because that would eventually lead to my brother and I not speaking anymore, so I kept quiet, but the truth will come out someday. I just regret that I wasn't able to stop it from happening. My brother has already filed for divorce and is asking for full custody of his son. His wife is devastated and insists that she still loves him, but it's water under the bridge. I'm glad he made the decision to leave, even after all these years. The only thing that makes me feel a little bad is that she's a cancer patient and this happened at such a bad time. It's really bad for her, but my brother deserves better, and I'll stick to that. I just found out from my brother that the man she cheated on him with and the biological father of his son was still actively involved in their lives until recently. He came over for a few drinks tonight and confided in me with this shocking news. This man is an old friend of his wife's, and he has always been in love with her. But then my sister-in-law chose to marry my brother because she felt that her friend was financially unstable, which simply meant that he was wealthy enough for her. She told him about her friend a long time ago when they first started dating, but he never suspected because he trusted her so much when she told him the truth. She claimed that they had only been together once after they got married, but only because they were drunk and emotional. But he doesn't know if anything she says is true. My brother said that he had foolishly believed her from the beginning and regretted spending so much time fighting against anyone who opposed her, because in the end it all turned out to be true, and she was just someone who wanted a little money from him, and he was the only one who foolishly believed her despite her reputation. After he left, I felt terrible because if I had pushed him a little more and forced him not to marry this woman, maybe he would not have gotten into this terrible situation at all. But now it's happened, and she's even still in contact with the man who cheated on her husband. Hearing him talk about how his wife often invites him and his wife to dinner, and they sit and chat like old friends while he raises another man's son, makes me feel sick, and I can only listen to him talk about it, but that's his reality. I can't imagine what my brother is going through right now. I keep thinking about how things would have been different if I had tried to show him her reality before he married her. It's awful that he has to go through all of this just because he chose to love someone who doesn't deserve it. I don't even know what his relationship with his son will become now, because all of this has hurt him. Marley has been living with his son, and his wife moved in with her parents, but she comes every day to beg forgiveness and convince him not to leave her. After all these years, it must be very difficult for him to say no to a real cancer patient. I know he still loves her, despite what she did to him, despite all the lies they told her during the marriage and during her pregnancy. I can hear it in the way he remembers the good times he had with his wife today. I wish I could help, but there is nothing I can do. The only thing I can do is look after my nephew, because he has a heavier workload, more responsibility and a higher income than he does now, so that he can give his son a better life. I don't think he will. Full custody of his son. Given the circumstances, I'd be willing to bet that the court would want the child to spend as much time as possible with the mother. If something were to unfortunately happen to her, it's unlikely that she would be able to fight the cancer for longer than she already has. As far as I know, her condition has been steadily deteriorating over the past few months. To be honest, I don't even know how I'm supposed to feel about any of this, including myself. I did my best to warn my brother, who was dating my sister at the time, but he wouldn't listen, so I can't blame him. But I can't shake the guilt. I can only say for sure that every adult has failed my nephew and messed things up, including me. I just hope we can all become better people. Update 3. Since my brother's last visit, he's been very busy at work. He stopped by today and asked me to watch my nephew for a few hours because he had to urgently meet with a lawyer. I agreed because this is when he needs my help the most. When he came back, he told me that his wife had already told a friend who the biological father of her son was, and that if my brother didn't agree, he was willing to fight for custody. He told me that she was still willing to reconcile with him, and even tried to play the cancer card, saying that she might not live long, so he should let her spend the last few months of her life peacefully, instead of being so selfish and ruining it with a legal dispute. She doesn't even understand that the custody battle is not about getting back at her, but just about making sure that even if she does die, her so-called friend can't just suddenly appear and take the child away from the father just because he is the biological father. Only a truly selfish person would think that this is about them. The only way my brother could get back at her would be to divorce her, except that he is too respectful to spend any more time with someone who has been using him for the past few years. A few days ago, she went to see the son and spoke to him again in order to convince him to stop the legal proceedings. When he told her he wasn't going to change his mind, she got angry and said those things, which made things worse. He thinks she only involved her friend to get back at him, and I agree with her. I don't even know what her friend's wife will say about all this. According to my brother, they've only been married for 4 months and they're falling into some crazy nonsense. I'm grateful that my nephew himself knows nothing about all this, and even today he still seems as happy as usual. I hope he can stay like that forever, because this poor boy really shouldn't have to face so much at such a young age. Update 4. Hello everyone. My sister-in-law came to visit me today. My brother, who had come here to drop off the baby for a while, hadn't seen her for a few days, so she came to my house because she knew he might come here. I wanted to tell her to go away, but she looked so sick and weak that I couldn't bear to refuse someone like that. So my brother took my place, and instead of asking her to go, he invited her in and told her to hurry up because he also had to go to work soon. I was in the room with him, and the whole conversation took place right in front of my eyes, which made me feel like I was intruding on their private business. My sister-in-law implored my brother to let her have joint custody. She somehow managed to get rid of her friend, because at first she didn't even want to involve him, but her emotions got the better of her and she finally confessed the truth to him. The reason he was involved was because she said she had accepted the divorce and didn't even want to argue anymore, but she really wanted to see her child because her cancer was getting worse, and according to the doctor this week it had already reached stage 3, so she needed to spend as much time as possible with her son. I thought my brother would refuse because he seemed so distraught, but he told her that the best thing he could do for her was to allow her supervised visits. He told her very calmly that she had been cheating on him for months, and that he couldn't just accept it because of her illness and carry on with his life. He was also in pain, and just because his pain and scars were not visible did not make it any less painful. He told her that he had fought against everyone who called her a gold digger and a liar, but in the end, that was what she was, because she had betrayed him, even though he had always defended her. Now he wanted to let her go for his sake and his son's. My sister-in-law didn't seem very happy, but my brother was adamant. Either she agreed to supervised visits once a week or she would go to court and sue him. After a moment of silence, she said she would choose supervised visits, because that was what the court would have ruled anyway. Now they just have to agree to this arrangement legally, and the divorce will still happen. Although I don't know what the future holds for my brother and nephew, I pray that only good things will come of it. Story 2. I noticed my wife coming home half-naked, so I checked the surveillance footage and found that our marriage was over. I'm 27 and married to my 24-year-old ex-wife. After nearly 2 years of marriage, I discovered that she was not as faithful as she claimed to be. My wife and I met on a beach one summer afternoon and we had a great time together. She came with a group of male and female college friends, all of whom were law students, but they decided to take a break from school. I was with a few friends, so some of us interacted with my wife and her friends, and we got along well. The conversations of the others ended the day after we left the beach for our respective destinations. My wife and I exchanged phone numbers and kept in touch occasionally. We started dating shortly after we met and got married 2 years later. Before we got married, my wife and I didn't have an easy relationship. My wife came from a wealthy family, and her parents were very harsh with us. They opposed my wife dating someone like me, and told her that if she stayed with me, they would say so because I worked 12 hours a day, held 2 different jobs, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a well-paying job. Her parents were nasty, but because we loved each other, we vowed to get married regardless of her parents' approval. After months of trying to break us up, her parents stopped and accepted our relationship and stopped interfering. I thought we would never have any more problems, but I knew there were more waiting for us. 2 months before our wedding, my wife cheated on me with one of her classmates and confessed to me. She said it was an accident, and the guilt had been torturing her. Meanwhile, I noticed that during the time she claimed to have cheated, she always looked sad and a bit depressed. Every time I asked her what was bothering her, she said she was fine. When she confessed to cheating with her classmate, she explained how it happened. I forgave her, and now I'm sharing my story. I regret making this mistake and wish I were smarter. I believe she won't do it again because I feel that if she confessed on her own, rather than waiting for me to find out, she really is sorry. It was very hard for me, but because I was young, stupid, and deeply in love, I forgave her. She promised not to do it again, and we continued to prepare for the wedding. Nearly 2 years later, although we have never discussed her infidelity with her classmates again, the incident has always lingered in my mind. I remember her confession every day, but I have never mentioned or talked about it. I do my best to let it go, because she has moved on and is trying to be the perfect wife for me. She is very good to me, taking care of me and treating me like the only man in the world. I don't know if this is her way of apologizing for what she did. But anyway, every time I see her, I doubt whether she is still sleeping with the person I cheated on. I even start to feel bad because I feel like I am still stuck in the past and not enjoying our marriage. After a year of marriage, I finally made up my mind to let go and go with the flow. I knew I hadn't taken care of her as I had planned from the beginning, so I started doing little things like making breakfast in bed for her and preparing dinner for us before she got home from work. My ultimate plan was to do something special for our second wedding anniversary, and I looked forward to that day. Finally, our second wedding anniversary came, and I made all the preparations, hoping to surprise her and at least make up for the bad times I had previously treated her badly. I even bought an expensive gift, clothes and accessories for her to wear. I went home early from work that day and waited for her for hours, but she didn't come home as I thought she would. I called her to ask why, and she said that one of her professors had arranged a class at the last minute, and she couldn't miss it because she could get points for attending. I felt disappointed when I heard this, but I didn't try to argue. I thought that since it was our wedding anniversary, she wouldn't want to miss such a special moment. I can't explain why, but that feeling that she's playing me came back, and this time I couldn't shake it or calm myself down. I decided to check her Snapchat location and found it was different from where she was in class. At first I didn't believe it, but after checking 3 times, I truly realized that my wife had lied to me again. I immediately went to the location, and it dawned on me that it was the apartment where her classmate had slept with her before we got married. I said I could explain his feelings of sadness or disappointment that night, but it wasn't enough to describe my feelings. I wanted to rush into the apartment and beat her up, but I had a better idea. I called her proud parents and asked them to come to the apartment so we could surprise her on our anniversary. I knew they would come because they would do anything for their only daughter. Soon after, her parents arrived when I called them. We went to the apartment and, upon knocking, said surprise. Her lover opened the door, and her parents saw her walking around the house naked. Her father yelled her name, and her mother pushed her app and rushed in. I would like to say that everything was terrible that night. She didn't know whether to beg me or her parents. I looked at her as her mother screamed at her and her father stood in shock after she covered herself with the sheets. I didn't say much, just told her it was over between us and it was my fault for cheating again. She didn't understand and I didn't want to explain. I don't know what happened between her and her parents after I left. She came home later that week and asked if she could talk. I said no and she grabbed what she needed and left. She didn't even. I asked her to explain. I didn't know what to think or guess. Before she came home to get her things in this way, I had already contacted a divorce lawyer. When the documents were ready, she signed without hesitation. To this day, I still want to know if she ever loved me as she claimed, or if she just liked the power struggle with her parents. The last time I followed her on Facebook, she posted a picture of her in her app with a mushy caption. I was so angry that I immediately blocked her. Thanks to that photo, I stopped moping around and began to wonder if she really loved me. I felt stupid, seeing her so happy while I was still stuck in the past, letting life pass me by. I'm doing fine now, recovering faster than expected. I've also realized that we can control our emotions and shouldn't suffer so much when our spouse cheats. I don't care about her anymore. I only care about myself and my future.